Hey guys, today we're talking about three very different movies actually that have nothing in common, I think, but maybe we're going to discover the missing link between these movies, so let's start. The first movie I'm going to talk about is Cyrano. It is an adaptation made by director Joe Wright from the play Cyrano de Bergerac, written by Edmond Rostand way back in the 18th, 19th century, I'm not really sure, but it's an old story about the guy with the big nose who's very ugly, but he has always been in love with this woman that apparently is related to him in some way. I think they're like distant cousins or something. He is very shy and he decides to help another man make her fall in love with him, but of course she doesn't really fall in love with Cyrano but with the guy that she thinks. It's creating these beautiful words. It's all a very romantic story, but in this case Cyrano is not a guy with a big nose, but it's a little person, basically played by Peter Dinklage, who is an amazing actor. I think we all know that from Game of Thrones. This adaptation, it's very musical oriented. I mean, in the original I think it was a play, but this one is a full musical from the first second the movie starts. It was filmed in Italy, in various towns in Sicily, which is quite amazing because it really gives it an authentic vibe. I mean, it really feels from the time this was happening in the I think it's the 18th century. Production design, the costume design, the makeup, I mean everything is just on point. Every single character is really well adapted to the story, and it really works for singing and for even for fights and action scenes here and there, and the romantic scenes too. And it's not boring as many musicals sometimes are, because sometimes you're just fed up with people singing like every fucking minute. But in this adaptation I think it's really well balanced. They don't sing every single moment in the movie, and of course the performance by Peter Dinklage is masterful because he's just amazing. He's just an amazing actor. He does everything really well. I mean, I also think that Haley Bennett and Ben Mendelsohn and Kelvin Harrison Jr. do a really good job, but they're nowhere near as good as Peter Dinklage, and Peter Dinklage makes you buy the story. I mean, you don't really think about the guy with the big nose here. You think about this little person living in a world where he's underestimated, but at the same time he has made a name for himself. This movie won't be winning huge awards, but I think it's really a big player for production design, even for cinematography. The cinematography is really well achieved, and of course for makeup and costume design. I think that those are the big plays for this movie, and it's an entertaining movie. It's a movie you can watch in the background even if you don't really want to pay attention, or if you don't really know Cyrano. This might be a nice way to get into it, not in an overly comedic way or in an overly serious way. I think it really works. It's really a good musical, and I hope Peter Dinklage keeps getting really good roles because he is a fantastic actor. Movie number 2 here is Pig, directed by Michael Sarnowski and starring Nicolas Cage, which is amazing because Nicolas Cage is one of those actors that sometimes you're like, oh my god, he's a fantastic actor, and other times you're like, really, Nicolas Cage? You did what? I mean, he is overly ridiculous sometimes, but most times he surprises, and more recently he has done small and bigger roles that are very surprising, and it makes you think that he's a very prolific and diverse actor in some way, because he really wants to play anything and everything, very different kinds of stories to tell with his acting, and I really respect that from Nicolas Cage. He's fantastic because of that. And in this movie called Pig, he owns a pig because he finds truffles for this guy that sells them to really upscale restaurants in, I think it's Portland, Oregon. He loves his pig and he lives in the woods and he doesn't talk to anyone, but one day some meth heads go in and just steal the pig, and he has to go to the city in order to look for his pig, because he doesn't only work with the pig, but the pig is a really important part of his life, and we discover why. It's a very short movie and it's a very concise movie. I mean, it only happens like in 2 locations, maybe 3. Like, it's almost like theater, but like really well crafted theater, and you discover so many things about this character that you really appreciate what people can go through when they grieve and when they just lose faith in things that have always brought them joy. And I think it's a very beautiful story to tell. Sometimes they do these massive movies, overly sensitive, overly dramatic movies about something like this, but this is a very understated movie that just shows you. It just shows you what happens, and it's very silent at times and it's very slow other times, but I think it's pretty damn effective. The other performer here is Alex Wolff, and he's the one who buys the truffles from him. And I think Alex Wolff also gives one of those performances that at the start you're like, I don't know if I like this, and then you're like, oh my god, I really get where he's coming from. I understand him, and he really complements in a way what Nic Cage is bringing. So it's a wonderful pairing of a really leading role and a supporting role that's really supporting. I mean, it really makes sense and it works. This is one of those stories that is simple but very well crafted, beautifully shot. It really uses the city of Portland in the best way possible. Of course, the best part of this is the performance by Nic Cage, which is just masterful. He should be nominated for an Academy Award. He really deserves it. I hope this movie even could get a Best Screenplay nomination. I would love that. I think it's a long shot, but I would love that because it's really what movie making is all about. It feels like a student film, but one of those really good student films. I'm praising it. It's not like shade, it's really a praise because the movie is very interesting and it's very good. And finally, we're talking about the latest from Wes Anderson, and that's The French Dispatch, about a newspaper that is from Kansas, but I think it's set in France. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense. But the thing is that this story is told in vignettes. I think it's 3 or 4 vignettes, and they're really short, some, and others are quite longer. I have to say that I loved the Grand Budapest Hotel, and I also love Wes Anderson's like aesthetic. I really think everything he does looks like one of those books that you open and they pop-up books, I think they're called, and it's really beautiful and really entertaining, and it's a really different way to look at cinema and to look at how you develop a story, for example, and how you show people what characters are all about. However, using the vignettes and the actors that he uses here, I don't think it works at all. It's too broken into pieces. The story that they're telling about the newspaper doesn't really come across. I mean, like, you don't really care. And although it looks good, this is surely going to be nominated for Best Production Design at the Oscars because it's really, really well done. But for example, I have to say that Benicio del Toro, it's one, he plays like a crazy person in an insane asylum that happens to be a great painter. He plays it in a very silly way. I mean, I don't really understand why they chose some traits for that character that don't work. Very, very silly, and the only good person in that whole vignette that makes sense is actually Tilda Swinton, who is amazing. She improves anything she's in. But for example, Benicio del Toro, Léa Seydoux, and Adrien Brody, I mean, they're just caricatures. They're just playing, they're just like fucking around. That's kind of an insult for an actor, but that's what they're doing. I mean, it's not interesting. It doesn't really go anywhere, and it looks like many things that Wes Anderson has done before. The movie kind of exploits what French culture is about and the French language, and they speak French randomly because they are in France. I don't know, it looks so stereotypically French. I've studied in the French school system. I've been to France. I know French people, and this is a caricature. There's a border between respectfully playing around with a culture and then being kind of insulting, and this is right in that border. Stop appropriating French culture. Do your own thing. I mean, if this movie had been set in Kansas, or maybe the paper is in Kansas but they go to Alaska or something, that would have been much more interesting. The characters of Frances McDormand and Timothée Chalamet are two Americans that are at the center of what should be a French story. I'm not even going to touch it further. And at the end, there's a story with Jeffrey Wright that happens to be a gay character, but they mention it like once, and it's like, what the fuck, who cares? If you're going to mention it once, don't put it. That's like a rule in screenplay writing. But the story is kind of fun because it's a thief and they kidnap a child, and it's entertaining until it's not, because it's a little bit too long. I mean, I like some of the characters and some of the performances here, but overall I find it very lackluster. The fantastic production design, the fantastic costume design, even the makeup, the score is really good, but the rest is just like fluff, and it doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, I hope the next Wes Anderson movie is better, but oh my god, this one was not it at all. So thank you so much for watching this review. Comment down below what have you thought about all of these 3 movies. And yeah, please like this video, of course, share on social media, and of course subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much. Goodbye.